Welcome to Kalwi's podcast series, where we explore how language shapes who we are, what we access, and how we move through the world. Today's guest is someone who knows firsthand the power of words, not just how to spell them, but how to teach them, coach them, and live through them. Grace Walters is a former elite speller turned coach of not one or two, but 5 Scripps National Spelling Bee champions. But her love of language didn't stop at the bee. It deepened into a lifelong passion for linguistics. Now pursuing her PhD in linguistics, Grace brings a unique perspective to how spelling, language, systems, and educational access all intersect. She's not just teaching kids how to memorize, she's helping them see the very structures behind the English language. In this conversation, we'll talk about spelling bees as learning tools, why linguistic education matters within and outside of the classroom, and how identity and access shape everything from how we learn words to how we speak. Here's Grace Walters on the Kalwi podcast. All right, I have with me today Grace Walters. Hi, Grace. I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for being the first guest on my podcast.
It is my honor. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So you've worn a lot of hats. You've been a speller, a coach, now a linguist, and we'll get to talk about all of them, but I want to start at the very beginning. So how did you first get into spelling? Was there any moment or a memory that sparked it for you?
Well, what inspired me to begin spelling? At that point, I feel like I was too young to even really be inspired. There was no beginning moment. I think my aptitude for language had been apparent from a very young age. Of course, this is all anecdotal from what my mother has told me. But at the age of 2, I was reading field guides and memorizing the names of flowers. I loved words because they allowed me to describe the world around me. They enabled me to access meanings that were specific and nuanced. And I had always been a lover of that power in language. I've always been a reader and a lover of learning in general. So in 2nd grade, how old was I? I must have been 6. My teacher at the end of the year told my parents, hey, Grace is always scoring 100 on the spelling test. You should think about putting her into a spelling bee. And my parents were like, well, sure, I guess. And they put me in the 3rd grade, and I've been doing it ever since. It's been 16 years, over half my life, since I started in 2009. 6 years as a speller, 10 years as a coach. This is a decade of coaching for me this past June.
Yes, it is. 10 years. Very exciting. Lots of experience.
And the most amazing memories. It is, to me, the most important thing I've ever done.
That's incredible. And of course, it continues to shape what you do still.
It does.
So you talked about how long spelling has been a part of your life. So let's start at the very beginning. So you mentioned talking about, reading field guides and scoring so exceptionally on 2nd grade spelling tests. What would you say really first sparked that love for words in you?
I think it was what I mentioned earlier. I think I've always, and of course this is before I can even remember consciously, it's apparent to me that the power that words have to access specific and nuanced meanings, being a master of language, enabling me to describe the world around me with precision, is something that I think has always been of value to me. In my living memory, though, I think words were just cool to me. There were so many of them. You could collect them. They all were unique and had stories. I just always thought they were cool.
Yeah, that's wonderful. A very true passion almost, because it's rooted in when you were so young.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just been a natural aptitude that I think I chased and my parents nurtured, and they sort of saw this and said, okay, let's support her as she goes along this path.
Yeah, for sure. And that perfect platform for you to grow that love and to showcase that love, of course, with your parents' support was spelling bees. So tell me about your spelling journey, first starting off with you as a speller.
Yes, of course. And I will say in the beginning, it wasn't always all sunshine and rainbows, like, oh, I'm so excited about this. I'm just loving words all the time. Of course, I did love words, but as you know full well, the spelling bee takes more than just that passion. It also requires diligence, a work ethic, devotion. And that was something that I, at the age of maybe 9, I didn't really fully grasp that yet. And so there would be days when I would love spelling. I would love my lists. And there would be other days where my mom would have to tell me, okay, go sit in this blue chair that I had. Sit in my little blue chair, and I would pout. And she would quiz me on words, and I would spell them and write on my hand. And there would be days like that where I really didn't want to do it. But my mom was like, you're gonna. And then when it came to my 4th grade district spelling bee, I was incredibly fortunate and got first place. And again, this is anecdotal. I don't actually remember this, but my mom says I came out of the room where the bee had happened and ran up to her and hugged her and said, "Thank you."
Aw.
And so that was an important lesson that the bee taught me. Of course, it's about a love of words too, but another reason why the bee is really important to me is that it is an arena for personal growth, for discovering values like work ethic, like diligence, attention to detail, resilience, like so many other things are. Sports is an arena for this as well, but spelling, I feel, has been my arena for learning lessons about life at large. So that was one of the first. Yeah, and then from there, in 3rd and 4th grade, I competed in the Association of Christian Schools International Spelling Bees because I attended a private school. We didn't do the whole big Scripps thing, the Scripps National Spelling Bee. So I started out in a smaller circuit and competed all of my years there. I progressed to the National Spelling Bee 3 times in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I got second twice.
Wow.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It was so much fun. I made so many great friends. Some I'm still in touch with to this day. I also did try out for the Scripps Bee 1 year in 8th grade. I managed to convince my school. I got the bravery up because so many people in the Christian school bee circuit were like, "Oh, Scripps? You mean the people that are on TV? Oh, like the big dogs, the big leagues. Oh, that's too hard. That's too scary for us, you know. We'll just stick with our little Merriam-Webster's 11th collegiate, you know, that you can lift with one hand instead of the big one." The big Merriam-Webster's 3rd dictionary. Yes. Oh, yeah. So in 8th grade, I finally got the courage and was like, oh, I'm going to give it a shot. And I did. I made it to my county level where I encountered a previous national finalist and one of the founders of the Spell Pundit, Spelling Bee Prep company that so many spellers are familiar with today, Shobha Dasari. So Shobha and I went at it. I think we had an 11-round duel, and I ended up placing second, which was tough. But I was really, really proud that I had gone up against such a formidable opponent, done my best, and was able to treat it as a learning experience and a chance to say, all right, did my best. I'm going to get up and keep preparing for my regional bee, for the Association of Christian Schools International bee. Yeah, it was great. Shobha and I are friends now.
And I mean, that just speaks to like the spelling community, right? And like all the things that you can learn and take away from a bee in terms of learnings, even if it's maybe not at the national level, or even if you don't win. In fact, I'd argue that you learn more if you're walking away from a bee without a trophy. Would you agree?
I do agree. I think many times the focus in the spelling bee world is on the trophy that you get to hold up like this. Whereas I think there are far more trophies that every speller wins anytime they do a bee, and even if they don't, just that journey of learning that you go on as a part of this competition, you learn so much and have so many new skills to take with you wherever you go next.
Absolutely. And you touched on those skills. So let's talk a bit about that, right? So as a nonprofit and as somebody who advocates for linguistic education, especially through the lens of the bee, a lot of the things that I talk about are sort of the portable skills that spellers and these students take with them. So can you speak a bit to maybe how, I know you mentioned work ethic, but maybe how those skills that you took away from the spelling bee or that spellers as a whole take away from this competition can really, positively influence and impact their lives?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. There are countless attributes that I think the bee has inspired in me. Work ethic is a huge one. I keep telling people that grad school feels like the bee to me because I'm currently a PhD student at the University of Kentucky. I have a 5-year stipend, 5-year funding, and that's, it's similar to the bee in that there's a limited amount of time that you have to achieve that goal. When you hit 8th grade and you age out of the spelling bee, that's it.
Yep.
And so it really taught me not only to work hard, but to think about how to manage my time when time is limited and sort of think about, okay, I have to focus on this now because I can only do this now. This is a unique opportunity and I have to make the best of it. Seize it to the fullest. And another thing about the PhD, spelling really helps you to gain confidence in yourself. Because when you're on that stage, it is just you. Sure, it takes a village, as you said in your champion speech, to raise a champion speller. But once you're on that stage, your team is out in the audience, and it's up to you at that point to use the tools they've given you. It's the same when you're up giving a presentation at a conference.
Very true.
It was terrifying at first. But I looked back to my days as a speller and even to what my students have taught me and how I've seen them, and you're such as yourself, behave on stage, right?
Yeah.
Like getting up in front, I had a conference this spring where I got up in front of the room and it was this big, auditorium with the seats that are like raised so you can see everybody in the room. And I was like in the pit in the middle. I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like a gladiator in the Colosseum. Everybody's looking at me. But I think that that experience being on stage from the bee and also tactics that I've learned from my students, like Karthik Namani, the 2018 champion, who was the first speller who got to hold the Scripps Trophy from among my students. He taught me about this deep breath tactic. Every time he would get up to the microphone, he would go, just this really deep inhale, exhale. And I have been using that ever since he won in 2018. I used it for my valedictorian speech. I use it today for presentations. Spelling helps you to develop that confidence as a presenter, confidence in front of people, and confidence in your own abilities when there's no one else there to help you out.
For sure. And that's a great strategy for any aspiring spellers as well who might face some trouble with stage fright or nerves, or anybody who's put in front of a stage and asked to deliver, right?
Right. It's scary.
Yeah. For
Spelling
sure.
Also, another value I think that's really important to talk about is resilience. Spelling bees it's a brutal sport. It's a game of perfection where one letter, one slip of the tongue, that can be the difference between the trophy and not. And typically, the National Spelling Bee, anywhere between like 250 to 500 kids over the years have walked in there, and usually, barring exceptional years, only one speller walks out with the trophy. So having to reckon with that, because of course everybody's goal is to hold the trophy at the end of the day, but having to learn to handle not achieving your goals with grace and with poise is a really important skill that the spelling bee teaches, to recognize the value in what you do, even if you don't always perfectly achieve your goals. And that's where a lot of the real trophy is, I think, as we previously mentioned. So that resilience is important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I would definitely agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Again, in graduate school, you submit a lot of abstracts to conferences, and a lot of them get rejected. And so for me, I treat it really similarly to spelling. It's, I went out there, I did my best, and sometimes it's not all within my control. And even just the act of putting together that project proposal and submitting it makes me stronger for next time.
For sure. And I'd say that's a very important life skill too, right? Like resilience in all of its shapes and forms. And speaking of resilience, another important skill a lot of spellers develop is also like longevity, sticking with it very
Right, perseverance.
persistently.
That
Yeah,
is something that you taught me, Harini.
I'm honored.
Yes. Oh, yeah. No, because you've done spelling. When did you start? When you were like this tall? I remember when you were a baby up there. Um,
Yeah, we have seen each other and we've seen each other grow since like 2017. Easy.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Learning to stick with it is. I guarantee you, when I get to my dissertation, that is going to be a skill that I fall back on from the spelling bee.
For sure, for sure. Sticking with something, commitment is an
Yes.
exceptional takeaway from the bee. And speaking of commitment, as we touched on earlier, this is your 10th year of coaching. This marks a full decade of
It's
grace
crazy.
brilliance. So walk
We're
me
so
through
proud.
that. Walk me through that transition from being a speller to a coach. So like what motivated that shift for you and really what did that entail?
Yeah, so aging out of spelling is a really tough transition for any speller, I think. Like, I mean, with the amount of dedication and perseverance and commitment that spelling requires, it's really tough when you pour your whole life into something and then suddenly the race is won. There's no need anymore. It's really tough to find a new routine and to fill that gap. And of course, there's so many ways to stay involved in spelling nowadays. You know, there's coaching, but there's getting involved with local bees as well. You know, local bees really need experienced hands helping them out.
Yeah.
Starting spelling and literacy related nonprofits, such as yourself, or even just mentoring a friend. And that was how I transitioned. I didn't know, like as I said before, I had never been to the Scripps National Spelling Bee. I wasn't familiar with the spelling community at large. All I knew was my little private school bee. And so when I aged out of spelling, I just was stuck with this feeling that my journey with the bee was not over. I still had so much love for words and for language to share. And I didn't want to move on. And so I thought, gee, I wonder if there's anyone from my regional that would like just a study buddy, just someone to call and talk about words with, because, you know, it's kind of a niche topic. There aren't a lot of people who can have
Fair
the
enough.
conversations that spellers want to have. So that companionship, I think, is really important. So I reached out to an old friend of mine from competition by the name of Rohan Rajiv, a name that the Scripps circuit knows well now. But at the time, he was a fifth grader that had gotten fourth at regionals when I won in eighth grade. And well, I guess he was a sixth grader at that point. And I said, hey, any chance you want to hang out and study spelling, like in the evening? And he was like, yeah, sure. Well, I emailed his dad, and his dad was like, yeah, it sounds great. And so we just called each other and talked about spelling. It wasn't like a formal thing at first. And he just kept winning and winning and having great success. And eventually it led us to Scripps. And that was amazing to me because I remember after he won the Association of Christian Schools International B in 2016, which was our goal, I was like, oh man, we did it. It only took us 1 year. We did it. Where do we go next? And
Sky's
I
the
remember,
limit.
yeah, I remember sitting in a Dunkin' Donuts in the DC Metro subway, like underground. And I remember his dad looking at me and Rohan with our sprinkled donuts and saying, so what about this Scripps thing? And we just kind of looked at each other and we were like, you know, what about it? And we decided to give it a shot and Rohan made it there. It was amazing. I remember the
Yeah, he
first
did.
day I walked into the ballroom with the stage. It was like walking in a dream. It was so amazing to see the space, like the mise en scène, the backdrop to a competition that I had watched on TV, a competition that had inspired me year after year. Like I felt like a little league player, like on the field of an MLB stadium. It was crazy. It was amazing. So
Yeah.
getting to walk that journey with Rohan and then see him place second at the B that we were all too scared to even attempt back in the ACSI circuit was truly incredible. And there, I realized, when I was walking down from the stage, from when the confetti fell, you know, spellers and parents were like, hey, would you coach my kid? Would you coach me? And I was like, what do you mean? Coaching? This is just me and my buddy. we were just friends, like going on a little journey together. And I was like, maybe I could do this coaching thing. So those first 2 years were very unique. But without Rohan, I would not have gotten in touch with the Scripps community, and I don't think I would have been, not as many doors would have opened for me to do what I did next, which was partner with Karthik Namani, who won the whole dang thing. And, the rest is history.
Yeah, indeed it is. I mean, like, that's another great skill spellers pick up, right? Networking, reaching out, and, what starts at study buddies turns out into, like, a really long friendship or something that,
Absolutely.
you cherish and you carry through. It's a really wonderful community. And,
Oh, yeah.
of course, you being a huge part of that, a really consistent part of it, too, would know.
I really appreciate that. That is something that's always been true for me in spelling, is that spelling has always been coaching has been a deeply relational experience to me. It's about partnership, always has been. It's been about getting to know spellers and getting to come alongside them as they prepare rigorously for this intense competition, but also as they learn these valuable life lessons and sort of come into their own as young people, as budding adults. And that's what's really special to me, is to get to see spellers go on these journeys and to walk alongside them. Like, it's always been a deeply emotional experience for me too. To me, the speller's journey is a lot like the hero's journey. Fraught with perils and challenges, but getting to be that mentor and walk alongside so many amazing spellers such as yourself and just provide encouragement and be a cheerleader. That's honestly one of my most important roles, is to tell you,
You're very
hey,
good
you
at
got
it.
this. It's so insanely special, and I learn so much from each student I get the privilege to walk alongside.
Oh, that's so sweet. I mean,
I mean it.
you're definitely like a huge cheerleader, and that like having that support with you can like make a really big difference for spellers.
I agree.
So speaking more about your coaching, right? You've coached multiple national champions, and we got to have a little reunion this year at the National B, so that was exciting. So, cool. So what do you look for in a speller? Like, I'm not just saying like diagnostically, like this, like a checklist, but what do you really, I guess, look for in a speller that you're like, okay, this is a student or a speller that I'd like to work with, that I could see myself working with?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head, really. That there is no checklist. There's a diagnostic, but it's more for me to see who you are, not what you can do. Because I think that is the core of what makes a champion. And also, you also really got it when you were like, oh, who do you work well with? Because I do think it's highly individual. I think the students that I choose, that I identify like, oh, you've got what it takes. It's not necessarily that other types of students don't have what it takes. It's just that the students that I'm like, that one, it's because there's a synergy. There's a similarity in perspective on how we view the bee. And I acknowledge that my perspective is not the only one that wins spelling bees. But I do try to identify students who have a similar outlook on life that I do, and similar way of approaching the bee. But at the same time, one of the most awesome and like beautiful things about coming alongside so many national champions is that no two of them are alike. Every speller I work with is so unique in their own ways, and I learn an individual lesson from each one of them, if not more than one. However, I think despite all of this diversity in spellers and how they operate, how they study, how they how they present themselves on stage, there are two things they all share. The first one is just a genuine love of learning and wonder at the world. Like just looking around and saying, wow, that's so cool. Just being amazed at things. I think that is one of the foundations for a champion because, and it doesn't just have to be a love of words. It can be a love of general learning because words are how we describe our experience and every part of the world around us. So you can have a love for biology, medicine, history, archaeology, pretty much you name it. There's words about it. We have to talk about it somehow. Mm-hmm. So that general love of learning, I find, is something that makes champions. And the second thing is a determination, a passion that comes from within themselves. And that's something you typically can't have without loving what you do. So these two sort of go hand in hand. You have to love what you do and you have to be committed to it because you want it, not because of anything external.
Oh, for sure. 100%. Yeah. I think like the root of so many successful spellers, right, is that they really care and they're passionate about the language and they're passionate about learning. And I think something that I thought was really interesting and really great was the first thing that you mentioned, right, about the general love for learning, because we might be talking about like linguistic education, about education rooted in the English language, but there is actually so much you're learning along with linguistic sort of structures like etymology, right? Like we learn Absolutely. Those things on sort of a more technical level than you might expect the average elementary age student to know. But we also learn about, different biological terms, different scientific discoveries, different maybe historical cultures, traditions, and so many other things. So that's actually a perfect segue into my next question. From a coach's perspective, how big of a role does linguistic education play in spelling bees? And of course, the resulting knowledge and sort of global perspective that these students gain?
This is such a great question, and one that I feel like mainstream media coverage on the spelling bee doesn't address enough. The spelling bee is often treated like a memorization game, where, you picture students reading the dictionary, turning pages, memorizing words. That's not what it's about at all. Of course, There are some words you have to memorize because of their unique histories and etymologies, but linguistic learning is the keystone. That is, to me, what wins spelling bees, is an understanding of language as a system. And I know most spellers, if you ask them, they'll tell you, no, it's not about memorization. It is about understanding how all of language is connected and understanding the patterns, the system, the rules. And of course, I use it all the time in my coaching. A linguistic perspective, to me, it just allows you to explain things, such as like rules and patterns about words and languages, or languages from which English has borrowed, that you just wouldn't otherwise be able to understand. It's just an extra layer of nuance in how you understand language. Another tool in your kit, so to speak. For instance, in my own work, which we'll talk about eventually, I focus a lot on sounds. I'm a phonetician and phonologist. So I think a lot about the anatomy and physiology of speech sounds and how we represent, and of course, in spelling, how we represent those in our orthography, right? So thinking about the actual movement of the body that is language, thinking about sound is movement. Like, that's so cool. If you boil it down, that's what it is. And the words that we spell, those representations are just people trying to capture the sounds in a static form. So thinking about phonetics can really help you capture phenomena that you wouldn't otherwise be able to. For instance, a German word like Landsturm, that is spelled Landsturm. You might be, why is that D, Land, why is that D pronounced like a T? Knowing about phonetics and the phonetic patterns in German can help you explain, German at the end of root words will remove the voicing from certain consonants, so that's why this D sounds like a T. And I don't want to get too much into the phonetics, but knowing those concepts and how the anatomical system that produces speech works can help you understand things about spelling.
For
And of
sure.
course,
And
on the oh yeah,
no,
on
no,
the
go for it, go for it.
historical and like language contact side of things, knowing about the histories of language and how languages in contact behave can teach us a lot about why we get some interesting spellings from words in colonized areas, from languages that were from colonized peoples. For instance, some
Absolutely.
Hindi words look absolutely crazy. They look absolutely like English.
Yeah.
One of my favorites of these is more punky. It's a type of boat.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Exact same word.
Oh yeah, Moorpunky. You might think that does not look like how modern Romanized Hindi looks at all, and it's like, well, it's because some British guy heard someone say it and tried to write it down in his own English orthography, and that's why
Yeah.
it looks the way it does. So, linguistic education and language as a system, that is at the core of spelling bees, and I think we should talk about it more.
For sure. And that is exactly what we'll be talking about in the second part of our second episode with Grace about more about linguistic education and more about her pursuit of a PhD as well. So we'll be talking more about the broader concept of linguistic education. Thank you so much, Grace, and we'll hear more from you in our second episode.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor, and it's so cool, again, to see you using transferable skills that you've gained from spelling right here on this podcast. So keep up
Of
the great
course.
work.
Thank you.